Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you for joining us for my latest Ask an Atheist. Now, I've had a number of guests. As you know, this show's been going on since the whole of 2021, and I've had an ex-Jew, I've had an ex-Muslim, I've had ex-Christians, I've had an idea, intelligent design fanatic, I've had creationists, and I've had atheists as well. And tonight I have got a Canadian atheist who's got an interesting story to tell because he started out being a theist. Let's ask him. Gordon Campbell, how the devil are you?
Hi, John.
Are you well?
Yes, thank you. I just like to say I'm honored to be on your show, that you have enough confidence in me that I won't muck up the whole thing.
Well, you're no more likely to do that than I am. I'm very good at doing that without your help. Thank you very much. Anyway, as I said, you've got an interesting story to tell because some years ago, you wouldn't be here in the guise that you are in today, would you? You would be on the other side of the fence. Tell us about it. How were you raised? What was your experience as in your upbringing? Were you in a faith?
Well, I have to say yes, because of society. Gideon's Bible Society came to my school when I was a young lad. Now, my parents would take me to church, but they also told me that I could pick and choose. So I did explore other religions a little bit. But basically, because you know how we believe in our parents, I guess, is that because society was all for it, and nobody questioned it or anything, and that's the most I heard about, is that there's other faiths and other beliefs, and that it was something that I was free to explore, which I guess not every parent does. So that was sort of a seed there that I questioned, but as when we talked before, I believe my basic reason. I was theist for over 50 years, and I believe it was mostly just to fit in, to be part of society.
Everybody's faith agrees with them. Everybody's God is on their side, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, it was like about fitting in, about not being like, I'm disagreeable enough. Like, I didn't realize it all these years. I'm a critical thinker.
Yep.
And people would say I have a problem with authority, but I don't. I just have a problem with people abusing their position or their power. Whatever, because you see it quite a bit, right?
Yeah. There's plenty of power.
Yeah, it can be even difficult sometimes. You get that promotion and things like to remember. I can remember one time, several years ago, that I let it get to my head.
Well, there's a saying, I don't know whether you're familiar with this, but it's the Peter principle, which is that everyone is promoted to the level of their incompetence. If you're good at a job, you move up the ladder. If you're good at that level, you move up to the next rung, and eventually you reach a rung where you're no good. So you don't go up any further. That's where you stay. So if you take that to its conclusion, everybody in a position of authority is no good at it. Anyway, you're right, of course, that we get our religion from our parents, pretty much. So that's why religions are geographical. They start out in the location and they spread circularly. Is that a word? They spread out radially like a bacterial culture and concentric. That'll do. Yep. They spread out like a bacterial culture, gradually taking in more and more people. So I was lucky in that my parents, I chose them carefully. They weren't religious. And that's what's so important to do, to choose your parents very carefully. Otherwise, you can end up being thoroughly indoctrinated. That didn't happen to me. I'm interested that you had the Gideon people come to your school, because I've only ever seen traces of them in hotel rooms where they've got one of their Bibles in the cabinet beside the bed. I didn't know they were real.
You might be familiar with the Alpha Club, though.
No.
No, they're from England way.
All right. No, I haven't met them either.
Well, let's just put it this way. There's things that happened in England in the 1980s that didn't really work out as planned, and they're continuing here in Canada.
Oh, I see. That's very cryptic.
An organization called the Alpha.
Did the Gideons make an impression when they came to your school then?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that's exactly why, right? A lot of the places I deal with now, I mean, even the churches, some of them are saying that they want to sort of get more people into the building, that they're lessening in numbers and stuff, and so they want to reinstitute and things. They always mention the 5-7-year-olds to 5 to 11 kind of thing, when you're old enough to understand but still not old enough to start forming those questions, right?
Yeah.
To look for the logic.
Get them young. That's the way. And that was, of course, what the Roman Catholic Jesuit sect did. They always said that if you gave them a boy of 7, they would show you the man they could make him into.
Right. And that's the epitome of a child that way, like very impressionable.
Yes.
I mean, I can admit that my entire life, I'm like a puppy dog. I aim to please.
Well, I was hoping to be able to introduce another guest for our show tonight. My friend, who is a British Nigerian, Tavian Oladapo. He's been on the show before with me, but unfortunately he couldn't make it in the end. He's got an elderly relative he has to visit. And so he's going to come on a later show, but he won't be with us tonight, I'm afraid. So can you tell me, were you active in the church when you were younger?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Not ordained, but I worked up and down through like a couple of churches, the Salvation Army, things like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Did you conduct any services or anything, or were you part of the procession or anything?
No.
Because that happened to me, although I wasn't raised in a religious family, because I could sing, and the school's music teacher spotted this, and she was also the wife of the local vicar. So I got co-opted into the church choir. So I
was always interested in things like that. I'd still maybe sing in the choir if I had a voice.
So I was dressed up in a ruff, these crinkly white starched collars and a surplice, a black gown right down to the ankles. And I had to walk through the church, go into the choir stalls and sing. And I did it for 2 weeks. And then I thought, nah, not for me. But when I started going to school, of course, at that time, the schools obeyed the law, which is still the law in this country, which states that you should have an assembly with religious content every day. Now, most schools now ignore that rule. But back then, we did. We had an assembly, and we had a hymn, and we had a reading from the Bible, and we said the Lord's Prayer. Sometimes we had a little piece of a service. Sometimes it was by the headmaster, sometimes it was by a visiting vicar or other clergyman. And so that was my experience, my early experience of religion. And I dropped it as soon as I went to what we call the secondary school in this country, age 11. And at that point, I thought, no, this is not convincing. So what was it that made you, because I understand you were active in the church, or at least a member of a church, for about 40 years. Is that so?
No.
No? How long?
Oh, perhaps a dozen or so. I went from many fields those years. And when we were talking before, as I explained, I was always a critical thinker, but I just didn't know it.
Yes. Yes.
I never gave myself credit for my intelligence or things like that. And I'm more of an emotional fella, so it was more important to me to fit into the community and things like that and follow along. So yeah, and then my whole idea was to do something for humanity, and I wanted to take science and religion, this in Canada, and mesh them together, kind of answer those metaphysical questions between what's going on between our ears and what's maybe really out there, and things like that. So yeah, like I said, the biggest part, I'll call it an exploration. I mean, I was a believer, so now I'll say exploration because it's part of my denial.
Yeah. Did that take a long while? Was that a slow process for you to come to a conclusion?
Over the years, I have family members, and I was a debater and things. And one I corner a lot of theists with now is, like, I see it happen. Actually, I mean, literally with their hands over their ears, walking away and things. That I know I used to do it myself. They're walking away, and they're reassuring God that they still believe in Him.
Yes.
And
there's a saying, isn't there? Don't confuse me with facts. My mind's made up.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's like, yeah, I used a line like that to get kicked out of an alpha group supper. I quoted someone saying, if you could reason with a theist, there'd be no such thing as a theist.
Exactly. Yes.
It's one I kind of dispel now. It does have to come from the self. Like I say, for over half a century, I was theist and I resisted things, but I'm still a critical thinker. And over those years, people were able to corner me and give me a lot of questions that I could not answer.
Yeah.
And so it stayed there with me, right?
Yeah.
Like I say, for 53 years, I'll say approximately, and then And then one day, yeah, it just, I spent about a week at home doing some research and that. I got into epistemology,
Yeah.
and within that week, I went right from, oh, well, this has taken a lot of ideas off of my life. I've wasted a lot of time, and oh, you know, coincidentally, religion just happened to be the one. Like when I went back to it, I just said, this just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't. And how did I not read the entire Bible before?
Yes. Yes. So,
That's exactly why they say reading the entire Bible makes atheists.
yes, was that what happened in your case? Was it a case of reading the Bible and realizing that it was not realistic?
Yeah, like I spent a lifetime, cherry picking the same way people do out of the
Mm.
Quran, out of everything.
Yeah.
Like as people told me, right? The same way people do. I go to a synagogue or anywhere, and that's what they would tell you. You have to, if you don't understand Hebrew, you don't understand Arabic.
Yeah.
This is the translation and the meaning, right? So yeah, I did the same thing theists do, and took people's word for it, really, and cherry picked. I knew a little bit what was in there, right? But like I
Mm.
say, then once I learned about epistemology and started to apply it, that was sort of the first thing, because I had always wanted to get science and religion to, I knew about history and how they'd say, oh, the scientists are burying dinosaur bones, and it's evolution is just a theory and things. So I mean, I knew it was true. Um, I mean, there's more evidence for evolution than there is for gravity.
Well, yeah,
So I
pretty
knew
much.
it was true.
Yeah.
And people would debate me in corners. And so, like, I claim now that constant abuse, I'll say, the
Yeah.
uh, constant getting me to back up my claims of God is what finally. So, so in the end, I think there's a small window in there for actually, like, getting the word out. That you most times you make people more defensive, and they'll walk away more thoroughly convinced of their beliefs. But
Yeah. Yeah. People people like to think they're right. They don't want to give up their deeply held beliefs.
it's
So,
it's
was it the internet that enabled you to discover epistemology?
well, I was in touch with humanist organizations, and was Richard Dawkins, perhaps, and
Yeah. Yeah.
people
Mhm.
from the Center for Inquiry in the U.S. I forget the other fellow's name that wrote with it, but yeah, I heard it when they started doing their street epistemology,
Yeah. Yeah. Peter Boghossian.
and they made courses for it and that, and I'm like, oh hey, I just happened to Google epistemology or something. I said, what's that? Yeah, so
Well, it was
that
it
was
was Peter Boghossian who wrote the book on epistemology, well, street epistemology, and it was Anthony Magnabosco who's a great practitioner of it, and you can see a lot of his videos on YouTube.
yeah,
So, so you're right. Lots of
probably on
people.
the internet somewhere I came across the word, and I just wondered, like, once I looked it up, the definition, I said that
Yeah.
sounds like something I'd like to use.
Yeah. 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 Mm. So you're right. A lot of people have tried to put science and religion together and sort of make them happy bedfellows in some way. And it's that trying to do that was famously done by Stephen Jay Gould, who came up with what he called non-overlapping magisteria. He said there's science and there's
Wow.
religion, and neither of them is right, neither of them is wrong. They just don't belong in the same ballpark, if you see what I mean. So that was his way around it.
I've heard the name before. I'll have to look into that.
Mm. Well, we have
Sounds
Google.
like what happened with me is when I tried to put them together like this. We'll say this hand is the science hand. It was more like this. Oh,
Yes, two
it just completely
two
destroyed it.
North Pole magnets pushing apart. Magnetic
Yeah,
repulsion.
with the epistemology, I realized how much I've been in a little bit of psychology and sociology over my lifetime, and what I started to realize is with science, if you're using math, unless I make a mistake or I've programmed something incorrectly, the math does not lie.
Yeah.
And then
Mm.
once I started to reevaluate my life, I realized things like religion, there's no mathematics to apply.
No, that's right. Well, I've had some debates like that where on my side, I've given a lot of facts. I've explained how you work out whether there's life elsewhere, for example. And I've quoted how many planets there are in a cosmos, and I've worked out that the chances of there being life, for example, somewhere else is huge. It's almost impossibly remote to think that there isn't any life elsewhere.
But at
So
the same time, you know how many orbs are out there that are inhabitable.
yes,
Like it is very sparse. But yeah, if we're here, there has to be something else out there. I've
it's
always
it's
stood by that.
it's vanishingly improbable that there's no life elsewhere. But
A lot of modern theory today is that we didn't start here. The primordial ooze was not on Earth.
yes,
That
that's a viewpoint. That is a viewpoint. But in these debates, my opponent, I give all these facts, and my opponent doesn't. He just says poetry or values or feelings, and he tells how very often he was depressed, and suddenly a religion saved him from his depression. He doesn't give any facts. It's all about feelings.
Why I talked about philosophy, psychology, and sociology. Once I apply the mathematics, there's where the only mathematics comes out, psychology.
Yeah, indeed.
And we do have, it's not exact math, but we do have math in a way where if you observe, and you put it on a scale, someone's reaction, say
that's right.
A adverse reaction is a 10 and a very mild reaction is a 0, then we can apply math to someone's reactions or their thought process.
Yeah,
statistics.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, that's one. For years, I even did it myself. There was people on the internet and they'd be saying, oh, a religitard. It's, what's the point of talking to a religitard? They were mixing religion and retard together, and then I realized my IQ didn't change. In fact, I think I had a higher IQ while I was a theist. But
what happens as you get older? Your memory goes.
Emotional need is what it is, right? Like I know people who are 10 times more intelligent than I am that have more like multiple PhDs, and they're still theists. And it's a small percentage of people. I think like 3% worldwide.
Mm.
But
so
it's the emotional need, right?
Yes.
I start with fear of mortality, and I know that was true with me, right? A lot of theists get cornered by me because I know exactly where they're going. I did it all myself.
Yes, you're right. It's all about the emotions. So I've got a clip here I'd like to show of a debate I did with a Muslim, and it points out that one of the things they're very keen on and they trust enormously is a scripture. They love an old book. They think that there must be truth in old books, and I disagree. So I'm just going to show this clip and get your reaction.
Another
Sorry?
dilemma with all this too, like which religion came first.
Yes. Yes, indeed. So I'm going to.
Can I just point that out now? I deal with this a lot. They'll say, you know, the history and things like that. But if you look at the Abrahamic religions.
Yep.
Oh, you can still hear me?
I can, yep.
Yeah.
So here we go with my clip.
So just tell me this, John. So do you believe in the theories of science?
The theories of science do not need believing.
I'm not saying they're absolute. I'm just asking. So do you ascribe?
No, I wouldn't claim they were absolute. I claim that they are the best explanation currently.
And do you acknowledge that they are also what's incorporated in the process of getting to the theory? There are other elements to it, such as testimony, reasoning, argumentation.
Let John make his point.
Every theory makes predictions.
Yeah.
And at that stage, you can believe the prediction or not. We would call it a hypothesis. And there will be rival hypotheses, just like there are rival runners in a horse race, and you can choose your favorite. Okay? And that is where belief is applied in science.
So you'd acknowledge that?
At the frontiers where we don't know.
Okay, so let me ask you in a simple way. We've got 1 minute about 2 minutes left. Do you acknowledge testimony as a valid route to knowledge? It's a simple question.
I acknowledge testimony which can be tested. I acknowledge, if you were to tell me that I can see a particular satellite going past at this moment, then I know that if I get the right equipment, I can check out your testimony.
Sure, but that's a potential, John.
Yes, I can check out your testimony. Otherwise, your testimony is very suspect.
Yeah, but I don't think you're understanding my point right now.
Because I could testify to you that I have fairies at the bottom of my garden. And unless you go there and check for yourself, you should doubt me.
Sure, but I'm not, look, we're getting into the epistemology of things. I'm asking you a very simple question. Do you consider testimony as a fundamental route to knowledge, something that science is also dependent upon?
Only if it can be checked.
But that doesn't look, testimony, you don't take testimony as a route to knowledge based on the fact that it could be tested. That's
yes. So because the whole point of science is to challenge claims.
Yeah.
Testimony is a claim.
Okay.
So it must be challengeable.
Okay. So
in order to be scientific. Well, there you go. Those are the sorts of things I get up to when I get a chance. What do you think of that? He was trying to claim that his book, in his case it was the Quran, was a good source of information. And I was trying to point out, no, it's not. It's ancient writings. It's, in the case of the Quran, it's about, 1,600 years old, or is it 1,400? It's many hundreds of years old. And what we knew back then was a lot less than we know now. And one of the things we've discovered since then is how to check. We've got scientific method. We can do an investigation so that anything anybody likes to claim, we can investigate it and see whether it matches our observations of the natural realm. But he doesn't seem to think that's important. What do you say?
I'm in complete agreement. It has to be testable. See, that's the thing. I just did that to a fellow online the other day. He kept saying, that the Lord has revealed himself. Revealed. And I'm like, all I can see is, okay, it's like Karl Marx talked about. They're on their apex of feeling high. This is revealing. I think it's self-induced, right? So I just asked him to explain the criteria or the experiment that he performed so that we could all try the same experiment and see if God reveals and to define what this revealment is. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and sometimes,
An observation doesn't count unless it's repeatable, which means other people have got to be able to see it in their own way.
yeah,
They've got to be able to repeat what you did to get to see that observation.
like it's really a misnomer. It's really disingenuous to say revealed when you can't
Yeah.
say in what way.
Yes, that's right. Especially as what they're relying on are so-called witnesses that have been described in their ancient books. And these witnesses can't be treated like present-day witnesses. I mean, if somebody was accusing you of having done a murder, then you would want witnesses that claimed that to be put in a witness box and to be interrogated by your defense lawyer. You can't do that with these so-called witnesses that are written about from, say, in the case of the Bible, 2,000 years ago. They're not really witnesses. These are old stories.
No, and they will find modern day witnesses too, because nobody loves better than to have a room full of people who are saying, "Oh yes, I used to be a bad person, but now," that kind of thing. To band together, whatever. I find some of these people that debate me are even trying to reinforce their own belief rather than convince me. And I've always seen that. Like, if you can go into a room and convince, the conversion thing. I've seen Catholics convert Jehovah Witnesses and things like that, and they put it up on the scorecard.
Yes.
So it's like a thing. Like, it reinforces, like if I can get you to start to think that there's purple dragons here in the room with me, then it'll make me more sure of myself in that fantasy.
Yes, they're trying to convince themselves. That's what they're trying to do. Let's have a look at some of these things here that people are coming in with. We've got, I'll put some of these signs up. Some of these people are not fans of ours. They are Christians.
I like to take a question from a theist.
Yeah, okay. Well, how many different drugs exist you? They think you're on drugs, Gordon. Now, logical, plausible, probable. He's claiming that he's got some sort of maths that disproves abiogenesis. I'd like to know that. And he's being rude here. Look, you are so ignorant. Now, why is he being offensive to us? Do you know? Is it because he's doubtful of his own beliefs? Maybe he feels offended. Panspermia is a logical possibility. I won't say.
When people go there, I'm like, one, it's an ad hominem. If you can't defeat my argument, you have to try to defeat my character.
Yep. He's got us both down as ignorant morons now.
And two, I ask for evidence. I go, it's easy to say, but I mean, I'm willing to listen if you want to tell me why I'm ignorant.
Oh, here's another fan of these two people are fans of each other. Logical, plausible, and Ottangelo. I had Ottangelo on my show 2 or 3 weeks ago. And these are...
I have to say, I used to do the same thing. I used to take great offense at people who were non-believers who would corner me in an argument too.
Yes.
Right?
Well, that's all you can do. If you can't produce evidence, all you can do is be offended.
For over 50 years. I don't get offended anymore. Being offended is a choice.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Gordon was a theist, Ottangelo. He's not anymore. He's seen the dark.
I was offended many times. and it was me that was offended. I would take it on behalf of the Lord, but because he was leaving me hanging.
Logical plausible is challenging to come on and challenge us. So come on, logical, I'll send you a link and you can come on and we'll listen to you. Okay, are you up for that? Let me send you a link. Let's see whether he's got the balls to do it, shall we? There you go. Click on there.
Some of the Americans end up, they get 6 and 8 people on there, and it gets ridiculous sometimes in the USA.
I know. Yes. The USA is odd in that out of all the Western countries, it's the most religious. Very odd. But the demographic is changing. You know, the latest polls in the USA show that now it's 51% of people who are not members of a church.
I have a paradox.
If you look at younger people, if you look at Americans up to the age of 30, 18 to 30s, it's something like 70%. So logical, plausible, probable. I've given you the link. Let's see you. Come on stage with us.
A paradox I'd like to put out there, John, for the theists. Several years ago, just as I studied epistemology, Christopher Hitchens passed away.
Yeah.
And his spirit possessed my body.
Yes.
And that is how I explain the smoking and drinking.
Yeah, you're right. Yes. So you're
for them, because I'll even tell them that neither Christopher or myself believe in spiritual other than the alcoholic variety, but they're the ones who claim spiritual possession is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've been possessed by the spirit of Hitchens, then you're a whiskey drinker and a heavy smoker.
Scotch, my good man, Scotch, yes.
So I'm telling this logical, plausible, probable, he can get on our show and he uses his phone.
The truth is, I can't drink Scotch without blowing flames. It's too hot for me.
Oh, he's coming. Look, let's see if he's... Hello, LPP. Do you have a camera or are you just on microphone?
I'm just on mic. I'm driving at the moment.
Okay, right.
I'm running some errands. Been listening to you guys.
Okay, so what do you want to say to us, LPP? Do you mind if I call you LPP?
No, that's fine. That's what most people call me. That's why I have it as the acronym versus having to say out the whole thing.
Okay.
So are you actually?
So what's your...
are you actually thinking that mathematically the panspermia is actually plausible from a probability resources perspective?
Yes, there's definitely a number of explanations possible. Let's face it, LPP. We don't know. The answers
no. I asked you a very direct question in relation to panspermia and the probability resources available in the universe.
If you're going to interrupt me, we're not going to do anything, are we?
I asked you a direct question and you dodged.
I'm answering. Look, I'm going to ban you if you won't let me speak. It's my show. I'm answering your question, and the way I'm answering it is up to me. So here it is. Here's my answer. We don't know the origin of the universe or the origin of life currently. There are, however, a number of hypotheses, one of which is panspermia, another of which is abiogenesis, and creation is also one of those hypotheses. Now, at the moment, creation is the least likely. Let me tell you why. It's because every mystery that we have so far solved, and we've solved a lot of them, that's why we're able to use this technology that we're enjoying tonight, has turned out to have a natural explanation. So out of those possibilities, creation, or call it intelligent design if you like, it's the same thing by another name, those are the least likely to be correct of the options available. Over to you.
Okay, so the first off, I asked you directly about panspermia and the probability resources available in the universe. Abiogenesis, or panspermia requires abiogenesis to have occurred just elsewhere in the universe. So you still have to account for that from a probability perspective. And then you brought up technology enabling this conversation to be engaged right now. Are you familiar with the information and communication theory necessities for this technology to exist?
I'm not I'm not an electronics expert or a physics expert. No.
Okay,
But
so in relation to abiogenesis, do you deny or affirm that the fundamental principles of information and communication theory are necessary for biological systems to exist?
I don't deny or confirm anything. I don't know. That's the situation. There is at the moment a gulf between inorganic chemistry and organic chemistry, but those terms are human fabrications, you know. There's no real gulf there.
Okay, so actually what you mean, inorganic and organic are different than biochemistry, is what you're actually talking about in terms of the gap. But I'm talking about biological systems and the known fundamentals of what is life, and it's chemistry, physics, and information. This is a recognized principle in origin of life research and has been for quite some time. So the point I'm making is that information theory, and specifically communication theory, going from Shannon Weaver on up, it's recognized you must have syntax, semantics, and pragmatics in order for information to be transferred. And it is well documented, well studied, and well accepted, even by staunch atheists, that all of those things are necessary for life to exist. So I'm not really sure how you are arguing that we just have the leaning towards intelligent agency is not a more probable outcome than when we know beyond doubt from an inference to the best explanation that intelligent agency is what is necessary for those things to exist, versus undirected process, which is what your worldview requires.
Gordon wants to have a word. Gordon, let's hear from you.
Oh, that non sequitur, that was quite a leap. A necessary creator. Okay.
No, I didn't say. I said intelligent agency was not.
You're trying to hold Mr. Richardson responsible for all of science. If you can corner him with your polysyllabic terms and corner him, because we're not PhD scientists, that's how I've seen it before, where people try to win an argument by getting all this science and things, and you created a jump in logic when you go, oh, just because we don't know, there's got to be something behind it.
No. I did not go God of the gaps. I went specifically in relation to known requirements.
It was precisely.
I did not do God of the gaps at all.
Well, I disagree.
You did LPP. What I recommend you do is look up how many metric tons land on the Earth per year of space dust,
including organic molecules.
Metric tons of space dust per year. Every year, the Earth gets more mass. It's growing larger because so much dust is landing on it, right? We know that all that dust and every meteorite and everything that we've gotten from the moon and everywhere are the same chemicals that we're made of.
That's a categorically false statement. Not the same chemicals we're made of. That's a categorically false statement.
No. We haven't found anything out there yet on any other orb that's not already known to us. There's no
So
new
what if
element.
you did?
Are you talking about elements? Are you talking about the things like
Elements. As far as we know, we're made out of the same elements that everything else is made out of. Like
well, I mean, we're
we're
carbon-based life forms. I mean, correct. But there's literally thousands of different chemicals that are necessary that are made up of those elements. You do realize that, like, you can take elements and then connect them in a variety of ways, and now you have a new, like, an alternative chemical molecule, right?
Well, you're not exactly speaking to 11-year-olds here. I'm a science teacher, LPP.
Okay, so what branch of science?
I have taught up to what you might call university entry level. I have taught biology and chemistry.
Okay, so then I assume you're familiar with protein synthesis, codon, anti-codon matching, ribosomes, etc. Okay,
Yes.
Cool. So,
Yes.
Do you accept that the genetic codon table is arbitrary versus chemical necessity?
I'm not even sure I know what that means. You're making false.
I'm literally quoting from PhD papers, man. So don't make that claim.
Which PhD papers? Michael Behe?
No, actually from Atheist. So are you familiar with Eugene Koonin? Let's see, James Joyce, Dennis Noble, Barbary. I mean, there's a variety of them that this is a well-established principle. And there's actually even a paper entitled, Do Biologists Need an Education in Information Theory? Because of the stunning ignorance of many people in biology in relation to what is necessary and what we've been discovering, i.e., I was reading a paper that was published like a year and a half ago on the multiplex coding logic of the genetic code is optimized in the extreme.
I'm unhappy with your use of the word necessary here.
In which context?
Who decides what's necessary? Until we discover how simple molecules become more complicated and eventually living, there's no more information. There is just a gap. You are claiming that there are necessary.
No, I'm talking about what's recognized in current biological systems. And the point I'm making is that a lot of biologists or people who teach biology, such as you, operate from this perspective, either from an ignorance or a rejection, that the fundamentals of information and communication theory are necessary for life to exist. That is the point that is being made. And I have had debates with PhDs, evolutionary biologists, on this exact topic of who are like, I actually had one he's a current professor at Rutgers University. And he literally made the claim that he saw no relevance of information theory to evolutionary biology. Well, and I'm like, are you kidding me? There's like, this is a fundamentally recognized thing in bioinformatics and genetic engineering and everything that we're doing. We're literally writing. There's a reason that Microsoft is funding the Cambridge Genetics Lab, is because they recognize the oh, holy crap! Turns out the data storage and computation in DNA is exponentially more efficient than the best things that we've ever created as humans.
Well, granted, but I'm not going to answer for whoever it was you quoted. You can take that up with him. But and you're right. DNA is a very compact form of information recording. And if we could only harness it, which is what Bill Gates is trying to do, it would be far better than SSD and HD. Yes. But that doesn't mean that it needed an intelligent agent to create it.
So this goes back to my original question about the genetic code. And are the codons arbitrary data value assignments, in your opinion? Or do you think that they are just somehow happened through chemical affinity?
Why do you think my opinion is important?
Well, I'm asking you in relation to you took the position earlier in this conversation. I was listening to you that, well, and since we've been talking, it's all God of the gaps mindset versus a inference to the best explanation. You also earlier claimed, both of you were claiming, that anybody who is a theist just believes in, oh, scripture, and scripture doesn't talk about this, and it's just a bunch of emotions. And I'm coming here to talk to you about why, from a rational, analytical, a logical, plausible, and probable perspective, it is a more cohesive and rational conclusion that a creator must exist versus our existence through undirected process.
I disagree with your use of the word conclusion there, because what you have done is a mental exercise. You have joined together some dots. You have, what expression do I use? You have made it a chain of ideas. What you haven't done, though, is observed the natural realm to see whether your chain of ideas matches what we see. All you've got.
Okay, actually, I am specifically, and this is why. Okay, so whether you don't want to answer the question about the data value assignments. Okay, so do you confirm or deny that the genetic code is a actual literal code in the equivalency of Unicode or ASCII?
It's, well, analogous. Yeah, it's not like either of them. And there are a number of ways in which it is different, because there's redundancy in it, and there's alternative codons which code for the same amino acid, for example. So there's your analogy.
Hang on. So are you suggesting that redundancy and degeneracy are somehow negates it being a code?
No, I'm saying that your analogy, like all analogies, is imperfect.
Okay, well, number one, you clearly haven't actually read papers on this, because there's clear distinctions that is not analogy. That is an ongoing talking point from YouTube atheists who continue to claim this point when that is a categorically false statement, which is why I've kept asking you, do you view it as arbitrary or some kind of chemical affinity versus, and the reason I go with that is because there's actually a whole paper written on this exact topic. About how we must now recognize that it is a literal code. It is not analogous. Actually, there have been multiple papers on this. You can go back to Yaki, one of the literal pioneers of information and communication theory, about this whole point, and how all of the different. So in the context of code, like, you can have different types of code, but they still follow the same fundamental underlying principles in communication theory. Okay, right? You have to have source and target alphabets for a code, right?
Yeah, sure. A code is a code, and DNA is a code. But
okay, awesome. So are you aware that the synonymous codons we're actually finding out that they have actually significant issues in relation to the adjacent codons to maximize the stability of protein synthesis in terms of the polypeptide chain formation in the ribosomes? That's just one example. Then we're also finding out, that's why I talked about multiplex coding, is we're actually finding out that what we thought were just purely redundant synonymous codons actually also perpetuate time-based logic controls to maximize the efficiency of the protein folding.
Well, fine.
So we now have dual use syntax that is controlling both X, Y, Z, and accesses and time-based controls.
Okay, now all I'm waiting for is the observations. What you have come up with there is a fine hypothesis, and I listed some hypotheses before: panspermia, abiogenesis, creation. These are hypotheses. How do we distinguish which of them is correct? Well, we do it in the same way that we have discovered all the information that so far, the mountain of stuff that we do know and we accept as unlikely to be challenged. And we do it by comparing a hypothesis to observations in the natural realm. That's the stage that you are missing.
No, actually, I am not. I'm not missing it. And here's why. Number one, you just claimed.
You haven't shown us the agent. Show us the agent.
Hang on. You just claimed that everything I was putting forth was hypothesis. I was actually putting forth evidence of known, testable, repeatable, and provable functions of a biological system and things that are necessary in order for life to exist. So,
hang on. That sentence has a flaw in it. You may have put forward a number of pieces of evidence, yes, but you cannot deduce from that that anything is necessary for life to exist. That is still up for grabs. What we have to do.
Which thing exactly? Hang on. For number one, you immediately dismissed and claimed that I was making a hypothesis versus putting forth evidence, and then you went on you can't show me the designer, therefore, which I hadn't even gotten to that point yet. I was putting out different pieces of evidence in line with our conversation and to clarify things. So let's rewind for a second from your dismissal. Now, we have now established that the genetic code is literal or analogous.
Oh, I see where you're going. It's a code. Yes.
Literal or figurative?
No, it's code. It's literally a code.
Okay, so we have arbitrary data value assignments to a source and a target alphabet. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we, just so you probably don't know this, but just so you know, we know beyond doubt it's arbitrary because we've been able to reprogram it manually and change the recognition of it.
Craig Ventnor has done quite well with that, hasn't he?
So, well, we can go down Craig Ventnor another time, because that's, if you're going to try and use him as evidence for where I think you're going, you might want to do some more research.
I was supporting your contention that we have been able to program DNA ourselves, because we've certainly been able to assemble nucleotides into a DNA and insert it into an enucleated bacterial cell, and it's worked.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing all sorts of engineering in biological systems right now. Yeah, it's because it's literal code, it's programming, it's computer, it's information computer technology, it's computer science. So
should we let Gordon have a go here? See, he's been muted for a while. Do you want to come in, Gordon? We can't hear you. Can you turn your mic on, Gordon? Oh, I've got it muted. No, I can't unmute you. You have to do that. You have to unmute yourself, Gordon. I don't know what's happened to your mic. Okay. Speak.
I had trouble there. Oh, sorry. I was almost screaming there because I want LPP to realize, okay, we're talking about DNA as a code. Now, all three of us, are we in agreement? It's not perfect. It's not an absolute. It's not a perfect code. It comes with flaws.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to disagree with you, because there's actually been studies on the fact that it's the most optimized code mapping it's a literal 1 in a million. And that was just when it was a standard code. And now that they know that it's a multiplex code, it's actually optimized in the extreme it's basically like the max efficiency. So I would have to disagree with you on that.
So Otangelo Grasso disagrees with you as well. I haven't let him in. He wanted to.
No. I've been clearly delineating the genetic code, which is in the DNA. Okay, that's what Otangelo is referring to. We're talking about the genetic code because there's regulatory factors, there's transcription factors, there's 3D structure and logic gates in the DNA that are separate from the code itself.
Mm-hmm. So, are you going to show me the agent that does this?
Okay, so now we're going back to if you want to go back to induction, we can go and do that. Deduction, abduction. So in context of inference to the best explanation, if you referenced at the beginning of our conversation the technology necessary for us to be having this conversation currently. So is there any context in which you would claim that the information communication theory methods, technologies, and components for the encode, message, decode process for communication, would you ever take the position that those things could create themselves without an intelligent agent?
No, we know that they were done by an intelligent agent. It was done by us.
No. I'm talking about you using your brain and asking if you think it is plausible that even though we have all the natural elements that are necessary to make them, do you think they could ever create themselves ever?
Is it plausible that sodium and chlorine can assemble into a cubic salt crystal?
Okay, you're dodging the question. We're talking about.
I'm doing a comparison like you did. Lots of things,
nothing can create itself.
lots of things happen in nature which appear to be created. Snowflakes, the Giant's Causeway, lots of crystals, but they don't need an intelligent agent. They happen by.
Are you about to try and use the crystal argument in relation to genetic code? Please tell me you're not.
Well, what you're telling me now is you want to indulge in the fallacy of personal incredulity.
No. I'm asking you in relation to well, answer my question first. Are you about to try and claim that because crystals can form, therefore it's natural for a genetic code sequence to form itself? Is that where you're going with this?
It's not. I wouldn't quite put it like that. I would say that there's lots of evidence to show that the elements and the molecules do form without any help naturally into complex molecules, and there is no reason to think that there is a barrier that prevents them from assembling into more complex molecules, unless you can provide me with that barrier. What is it?
So we got compression algorithms. We've got, which by the way just completely annihilates the whole crystals comparison argument. But in relation to what we're talking about in terms of a genetic sequence, this is the whole point of it being arbitrary from a chemical affinity perspective. And the whole point of this is the Watson-Crick base pairs. There is no reason for them to bond to the ribosome backbone. Like there is this is a recognized reality. Therefore, the sequences that are formed are 100% random. So you are now looking at this in terms of a specified sequence, which now is operates, and you have codons, which now operate as the source alphabet, that are now being organized into specific sequences that are now being translated by an adapter and decoder in the ribosome into a target alphabet. Like, so you have a literal, not analogous, you have a literal, not a metaphor, a literal communication system that requires information, specific information from a pre-existing code base, codec, on both sides of the equation. So this is not personal incredulity. This goes back to, do you think that ASCII and via binary could create itself?
Pure God of the gap. Just because we don't know how ribosomes originated and how the RNA assembles around them, it doesn't mean that your God did it.
Okay, so you're claiming that I'm arguing from personal incredulity when we recognize that in experiments, getting more than about 20 RNA nucleotides to bond together is basically impossible, and that's before accounting for the homochirality necessity for it to work. So, we're not even the evidence in the Origin of Life research lab is showing more and more that the plausibility of what nature could just do it is not actually plausible. And that's not even accounting for what I'm talking about right now in terms of the specified information that's required too, which is also recognized.
You're not offering me evidence. You're offering me ignorance.
How am I the one being ignorant when I'm talking about testable, repeatable experimentation that shows that? Now, how do we, when we're synthesizing a DNA strand, and we're doing genetic engineering, how are we doing it?
We're doing it with clever machines that we designed to do it. But again, you see, what you are saying that because we don't know how these things happen, and because it seems to us to be highly improbable that it could happen by nature, therefore, an intelligent agent, I recognize you've dodged around the creation issue. You want to call it an ID or whatever. But what you're offering me is not evidence. I want the same as, listen, you know that the Drake equation, you know the Drake equation, don't you? I take it that you do. Yes. Well, what that tells us is that
and is the probability of us actually being is that getting harder or more plausible? More plausible or more implausible?
It doesn't. No. Plausibility is an opinion.
No, plausibility is specifically related to the improbability, correct?
What it tells
yes
us,
or no? Is the plausibility related to the probability?
It doesn't matter whether it's related or not. It's still only an opinion.
So the Drake equation. So hang on. So you're relying on the Drake equation, and earlier before I came on, you were on a whole tangent about like, oh, well, there's all these planets in the universe, therefore it's plausible for X, Y, Z to happen. And then you guys went into panspermia and all these other things. And the point that I am making is that the more that we discover, both from a cosmological perspective, as an astronomy perspective, as well as a biological perspective,
You're talking over my point. This is a gish gallop you're into now.
No, actually, I'm not. How am I gish galloping? I'm directly addressing the stupidity of the Drake equation argument you're trying to make.
My point is that despite the high probability, the great opinional plausibility that there is life elsewhere, do we take that as a fact? No. What are we doing? We are looking for observations using SETI, and that's what you should be doing.
Okay, so let's think about this for a second. So
at the moment, we don't know how the ribosome was formed and how the earliest forms of life began. So what you should be doing is looking for observations. You shouldn't be going on all this.
You do realize I am looking at direct observations, right? Like real-time observable observations, and I'm coming to an inference of the best explanation, which is a valid method.
Granted, you're looking at a big pile of facts, and you're coming to a gap, and yet that's when you say, therefore my God done it.
No. How am I coming to a gap? Are you suggesting that from a forensics perspective, using intellect, using known, when in philosophy, for example, when you're arguing over a premise, right, you use induction in relation to the deductive soundness and validity of the premise.
Okay, granted, argument is one thing, and it's very useful when you are evaluating hypotheses and which way you should investigate, whether you should follow one line of research or another. But it's not observations. Okay.
Now,
of an investigation. It's not a conclusion. It's the start.
Do you want to find out
or do
you not?
Proposal is correct or not, and the way to do
So from a plausibility perspective, do you have to take into account the probability resources available to you? Yes or no?
Yes, for a hypothesis.
Okay. Now, in relation to
what do you do then when you've got your hypothesis? I'll tell you.
Hang on. I have a logic flow I'm following here. Okay, so we agree that you have to account for the probability resources available in relation to the plausibility of a hypothesis. Correct?
Referred to as God.
Yes, and then when you've got your hypothesis, when you've evaluated your hypothesis and decided that the one you think is an opinion is most plausible, what do you do then?
Okay, so what is the recognized?
You conduct an investigation seeking observations. Sometimes, if you're lucky, the observations confirm your hypothesis. They may not, of course, but that's just as much a conclusion as if they do.
Hang on. Listen, you accuse me of gish galloping. This is hilarious. Okay, so number one, why do you think that atheist origin of life researchers are published stating that the more realistic way to account for the improbabilities from an abiogenesis perspective is, we must have a multiverse, because that's the only way to overcome the improbabilities due to a lack of probability resources in our universe?
For personal being God.
Speak to them. I don't know.
So we're going back to actually who is taking a greater leap.
Let
me finish. Okay, so currently in our 13.7 billion year old universe, you've got 10 to the 17th power of total seconds to work with. You've got 10 to the 80th of total particles and 10 to the 121st of
your statistics are mistaken, because they're not relevant, because you're assuming that the mechanism is chance. See, it's not.
Okay. Whoa, hang on. You must have missed the point I made earlier about the DNA and the sequences and there being no chemical affinity and it being recognized that the sequence formation is dependent 100% on chance.
Well, I haven't seen any evidence for that. And you
it's published. It's a published premise. It's published.
A premise. Okay.
No. Okay. Let me rephrase. From a chemistry perspective, it is a recognized fact.
What you are reporting is scientists' opinions when they have been
recognized fact, sir.
When they have been put up against it by somebody like you, and they have been forced into giving an opinion. Their opinions don't matter. What matters?
Hang on. What I'm talking about is not. It has nothing to do with debate.
What matters? You're reporting scientists who say something that I forget what you said now. There's something that you agree with. That there's no. It's statistically unlikely that certain things can happen. But
so hang on. Would you say that Watson
those scientists are expressing an opinion about what hypothesis they favor. That's not the end of the story.
Watson and Crick. Are you suggesting that Watson and Crick were incorrect on what I just said about the chemical neutrality of the sequence formation? Are you telling me that Watson and Crick were just subject to opinion when I'm talking about from a chemistry perspective? I'm not talking about opinion. I'm talking about from a chemically recognized perspective. Seriously, answer my question. Are you stating that Watson and Crick are incorrect when they stated, and multiple others have gone on to prove in even greater detail and from a multiple experimental perspective, are you stating that they were incorrect claiming that it's neutral? What the hell do you think the frozen accident hypothesis came from?
Watson and Crick did a grand job of working out the structure of DNA, the shape of the molecule of DNA. But what you're doing is going on to some other areas where Watson and Crick, or their modern day equivalent, have not managed to find the answers. And you're saying that therefore I can hypothesize, and this is the hypothesis I prefer. The hypothesis I prefer. Let's listen to Gordon. Poor Gordon, he's here in the chat and he's not being given a chance.
Okay, hang on. Your hypothesis. No, I was talking about the being subject to random chance, which you were trying to dismiss. And the point that I was making is I have scientific proof and published assertion by a plethora of folks that it is, like, in terms of the sequence formation, it is 100% chance because there is no chemical affinity. It's a recognized, experimentally tested, proven fact. There is no chemical affinity.
Chemical affinity between what? The two nucleotides?
No, between how the Watson-Crick base pairs bond to the backbone. Okay, so there's there's hydrogen bonds between the two.
Yes, hydrogen bonding between the base pair.
Yeah, okay. I'm talking about the actual bond. I'm talking about the chemical bond to the backbone. Okay, there is no chemical reason for them to bind in any specific pattern, which is why we're actually able to have arbitrary sequences, and for the codon triplets to act as an alphabet is because of the chemical neutrality and the lack of chemical affinity to enable you to create a source code, to create a coded sequence. This is a well-established principle. It's like well-established. And there's papers out the wazoo. I have like 300 papers on this topic. Right now. I read things all the time, and it cracks me up when I talk to people like you guys who make all these staunch claims. And when I say no, you in this context, you are 100% dependent on chance. And this is why I go into probability resources for the universe, for the time factor, different things. And people like Gene and Cooper with an H index of 213, he literally goes like, well, the only way to make this plausible is, and he's a hardcore atheist, by the way, the only way to make this plausible is a multiverse.
It's been a long time since I studied the ribosome backbone chain. So I'll have to defer to your greater knowledge in that respect.
I wasn't talking about the ribosome. I was talking about the DNA or RNA backbone. The ribosome's the the RNA and protein combo that does protein synthesis.
What? The DNA backbone doesn't have protein in it?
No, you said ribosome, correct? The
Sorry, sorry, my mistake.
I was just clarifying.
Yes, that's my mistake. Sorry, I meant ribose, the sugar.
Right, I figured that's why I was asking clarification.
Yeah. Sorry, it was a slip of the tongue.
The reason I made the clarification, if I had a debate with somebody a while back who argued adamantly that codons literally chemically transformed into amino acids.
Well, that's a historic debate you had. It's nothing to do with me. But I'm sorry, I made a slip of the tongue. Ribose is a very similar word to ribosome.
No, it's all good. I totally get that.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, hypotheses are one thing, and they're great when we don't have information. But they are the beginning of an investigation to seek observations which will confirm or deny whichever of the hypotheses are correct. And that's where you're at with your statements of statistical improbability. You need to do the investigation and to come up with supporting evidence. But you're not going to like this. The show was supposed to end 27 minutes ago, and I'm going to call it off now. And I'll be happy to discuss this with you in texting afterwards. Okay?
Yeah, I suggest that I appreciate you having the conversation with me. I hope you will retract your little assertions before this that you didn't think I would have the courage to come in and face you guys, because
sure.
I will.
Yeah. No, it's
but
obvious.
Moreover, in the context of all this, this will be my final. Where I'll let you guys go. I always find it extraordinarily fascinating how in streams like this, there will be two people such as yourself and Gordon who make all these assertions about people who believe in a God somehow having lack of knowledge and reasons for their conclusions. And just so you know, I only covered like a minuscule fraction of the things that I've researched to have led to my conclusion. So
okay. Abject apology. You do have the courage, and you're not ignorant. Now let's let Gordon come in for a few minutes, because the poor guy's been sat there not taking part. Gordon, speak.
John, I sent you a link. What he's using is called the cosmological argument.
Yeah. Okay, right? I'll look at that.
It's been debunked since.
Thank you for that. I'll look at that, Gordon. I don't know where you sent it. Is it? Oh, you've got it. It's in Messenger. Okay, I found it.
A complex way of doing God of the gaps.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of different ways of doing God of the gaps. It's just a case of where you want to find a gap. You know, if hundreds of years ago, God of the gaps would have been much easier to find, because there was a big gap.
Now, we don't disagree with the science that you're talking about, but you're connecting science and saying it's necessary for something to have created.
Yes.
The only
so do you deny? So do you categorically deny the law of causality?
No.
I'm not disagreeing with anyone's
causality works very well in the natural realm. What's that got to do with anything?
Okay, so if natural causality isn't,
can I say something?
Go ahead, Gordon.
Using any modern day scientists who talk about these things. He's not using modern day scientists. He's cherry picking certain. This is what this cosmological argument does. His science is correct. He's using certain studies and excluding certain other ones.
No, I'm not, bro. Not on the fundamental pieces that I put forth. I have not used outlier pieces of evidence at all. I have used well-established concepps.
You're trying to corner John as if he's responsible for the universe. Like if John can't hold up to your interrogation, then it's not real. And this is exactly what you do. And this whole cosmological argument is trying to argue with.
Okay, so I wasn't making a cosmological argument per se. So do you even understand what a cosmological argument is? Because I wasn't making one.
I want to correct something you said, LPP, because you said in shows like this we have. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, John. I can barely hear Gordon. I think his mullet's getting in the way of his microphone.
No, I think his microphone's not very close to his mouth. But the thing is that you said that these shows feature a couple of guys who are unchallenged. Well, no, that's not true. If you look at my previous shows, you obviously haven't seen them. But last week, who did I have? Last week I had Zach Ardern, who is I think he would call himself an intelligent designer. And then the week before, I had Steve McRae, who is a very keen. I think he would probably deny that he's a logician, but he argues like you, philosophical point of view.
Well, Steve McRae's he's an agnostic.
The week before that, I had Otangelo Grasso, who is in our chat now today. So always two guys up against others who are not present. I take others like yourself into. I engage them.
Even if we agree with him, which god? Is it Odin? Is it?
Yeah. No, my favorite god, Gordon, is Nkulunqulu. He's the South African creator god, and
I have a explanation that it's the Norse god Loki, the god of mischief.
Yeah.
Thing explains like X theory, coincidence, stuff like that.
Okay, so do you do recognize that if I was actually in a cosmological argument, I could be annihilating the premise of Loki actually being God in relation, because the Loki is an entity inside of the universe versus external to the universe.
I know. You can. I've been in this situation before, where a Christian, in this case, argued that because I suggested some gods had reincarnated, he suggested I was wrong because Christians have resurrected.
No, I was talking about from a logical perspective in relation to like the Kalam, for example. I mean,
I know, but
I'm not playing nuanced semantic games. I'm talking about actual
logical. Listen, you're in the States and it's your mid-afternoon. It's my bedtime. I'm in the UK. We're ahead of you by a number of hours.
I know. I was born and raised in the UK.
Were you?
Yep. I was born just outside of Cambridge. Lived there until I was 18.
You must have been moved when you were very, very young because you don't have the accent of somebody.
No, because I'm an American citizen who was born and grew up in England. I grew up on the 3rd Air Force headquarters in Suffolk.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. So you were in an American-speaking family. So that's why you sound like an American.
Yep. And I can do a perfect English accent, but I refuse to do it because I catch myself sounding like an American trying to sound English. So
yeah, you don't want to do that. Just take
now when I was growing up, I could do a perfect switch back and forth.
Could you? Yeah. Take a lesson. Take a lesson from Dick Van Dyke. Don't try Cockney.
Well, that's very true. Are you talking about from the Mary Poppins?
Yes.
Yeah. That was a rather. Well, the irony of that too is that most Americans are so ignorant about UK as well as just Europe in general. They think that everybody sounds Cockney in England or sounds like the Queen. When I was growing up, I used to be able to I could pick out if you were from Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, York. I could pick up on the different accent sections, but now I kind of blur them together. But much more definitive back then.
And we can't understand people from Newcastle or Glasgow.
Well, that's very true. Yeah. The Scots are a whole nother. They're a whole nother animal.
Gordon, do you want to have a last word? Because I'm going to end this broadcast soon.
Well, yeah, it's like a cosmological argument that I say starts. The logic is theologic, and it basically starts with the conclusion. So,
Gordon, what do you think is a cosmological argument? Because I have not been making a cosmological argument at all.
I have to go back.
That's a subject for another day. I'm going to call it off now because it's too late. Nearly my bedtime. Thanks, You're both nice guys, and you have been fantastic. Thank you for appearing on my show.
The cosmological argument.
Yeah, he's gone now. He's gone now, Gordon.
The creationists use the same things, right? It's the same thing that goes down. You even nitpick about carbon dating and the whole thing and stuff like that, right? And you can find little nitpicking things to pick away at.
That's right. But I don't think LPP is in that bracket, because I'm pretty sure he would know that the radioactive isotope carbon-14 doesn't have a long enough half-life to be useful in paleontology. It's okay in archaeology, but not in paleontology. The dates are too large. Anyway, Gordon, you've been fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for watching. This is the end of the show. Next week, we've got somebody else to argue with or to agree with. Let's see what happens.
I hope next time I get to tell my story.